Please welcome Dr. Robyne Hanley-Dafoe.
I study human performance, and I reached out to folks and said, how are you? They said, Robyne, I am done. I'm so tired all the time. And how we can generate energy is called attunement. And let me tell you what that looks like. Has anyone ever seen an 18-year-old girl in a mood before? And in that moment, I said, do you want comfort or solutions? She said, Mama, what I want is you to sit with me right now and hate math as much as I do. The body interprets that support with the notion of possibility. And I said, why were you so worked up about math? And she goes, Mama, I was in English class. And the teacher said, what is the last book that made you cry? And she said, calculus. I know.
To know that you can do hard better and resilience is a choice, that you can wake up every morning. It's really inspirational. I resonated with that so much.
What we know is that if you had no stress, you wouldn't be very good at your job. Stress is an energizer. It gives us focus, it gives us this idea of what's important, but what we want to be careful about are the doses of stress that we're getting on a daily basis, because what's happening there is it's pushing us into what we call the zone of distress.
When you laugh, your body releases a natural tranquilizer. So for that moment in time, your pain receptors are blocked. You can't feel pain, which doesn't solve your problems, but it does give you a moment of reprieve. A moment to be able to decide to respond versus react. That moment of pause.
I think it really gave everyone a new perspective of how to reframe the way that we think about stress, especially for those of us who are in the thick of it. The world needs to know about this. I'm excited to bring all of this back to our team.
Now, burnout is so real, and one of the things that we learned about burnout that's so significant in the last wee while is burnout is the curse of the strong. Burnout is the curse of the strong. You have to care so deeply to hit the point of burnout, because people who don't care do not burn out. And Dr. Charles Figley writes about this as what he called compassion fatigue. It's the cost of caring.
Now, another interesting research finding, and I do get a wee bit nervous because this is what I get referenced for the most. Imagine 20 years worth of work, and this is the one line that people like to talk about, even to the point when we shared it on social media. Last time I checked, it had like 8 million views, right? So this one piece of information people love to hear about. Would you like me to tell you what it is? Oh, you guys are so good. Okay, we learned that people who swear, okay, not curse or cuss at somebody, but more of a floating narrative, right? You know what, I feel like you know exactly what I'm talking about. I feel like you know what I'm talking about. This is what we discovered. People who know how to swear without offending anybody or getting in trouble, they live longer. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
I just loved her message. I'm definitely sharing it with my team and everyone that I work with, because I do think her strategies are so impactful for how we live and just how do we show up the best version of ourselves.
I can do hard things. My hope for each and every one of you is that you can trust that you can do hard things, because life is going to show you hard things, and the natural human condition is to avoid it. It's to go around it, to try and find a hack or a workaround. However, on the other side of the test is the most important lesson that you need to learn in that particular season of your life.
I see myself as a teacher. I get to do research, and I've been doing research for Trent for over 10 years, and I absolutely love it. And what I love to do is to be able to take complex material and present it in a way that my students can actually understand it. So when I think of myself as a researcher and a teacher, I also view myself as a knowledge translator. I want it so when you see that research, it actually makes sense and you know what to do with it. And one of the things that I love so much about being a researcher is science. I love science. I love the psychology of people and the science of people. And one of the things that I really like about science is what it can do. Science can describe a phenomenon. It can explain a phenomenon. It can predict a phenomenon. and it can control. It's the ultimate goal of science is to be able to control. Now, even though I love science and I'm a researcher, there's a part of science that I actually don't really like. And the part about science that I struggle with is this notion of prediction. See, prediction suggests that we know how something is going to go, right? That's a whole idea. And we have this idea of what it's going to be able to look like, right? So as a researcher, I can make predictions about what a child is going to be able to accomplish or what students are able to do in my classroom. And, most of the times when we think of the bell curve of science, most of you are familiar with this notion of a bell curve, right? When we think of a bell curve, one of the things that we see in science is as this normal distribution, right? And the reality is 66% of the population will have a story that usually fits with our predictions. Okay, about 66% of the time it's going to work for them. Now, I'm a bit of an anomaly in the sense of this. My bell curve, my experience was a lot more like this. Okay, my bell curve was completely upside down. The last time I felt competent in school, that I felt smart in school, was when I was in junior kindergarten. I peaked at JK. Okay, JK was the last time when I walked in a classroom and felt, man, I got this. Okay? I left JK, went into senior kindergarten, grade 1, and my educational experience was essentially a downhill fall. What I thought was curiosity and excitement and energy was quickly called hyperactive and distracted, and I was told that I was never going to be successful in school. So when I came to grade 9, they put me in basic courses. And as soon as I got into grade 9, they said to me, do you know what? I don't think she's going to be able to finish high school. And there were teachers around me who were trying to support me, but I still remembered the voice of the people who were saying, she's not going to be able to finish high school. And do you know what? They were actually right. They were right for a moment in time. When I went into grade 11, I decided I can't do this anymore. I wondered, who am I fooling to think that I can actually do school? I'm not an academic person. So I dropped out of high school in grade 11. I left. I gave up. Okay? It's a feeling that I know it broke my parents' heart. They had an older child who was excelling off at university, and I said to my parents, I just can't do this anymore. It's too hard. I don't get it. I don't understand. And I said, besides, they all told me I wasn't going to be able to finish grade 12 anyway. Why am I bothering doing this? And then what was really interesting, I had this event. I had this event happen, and I call it the best, worst day of my life. Okay? It was the best, worst day of my life. The best, worst day of my life happened in 1996 in the middle of winter. I had dropped out of high school. I had my driver's license for 1 week. Okay, I had my driver's license for 1 week. And my vehicle went off an embankment, and it landed in the Otonabee River. My Jeep broke through the ice, and I sank in my vehicle. And what was very interesting, I was in the situation where I knew I was dying. I knew that I was facing death. And what kept coming back to me, I was so surprised in this moment because I felt very calm. I felt very calm, and I actually just kept on thinking, problem solve this, Robyne. Problem solve this. So I thought to myself, I just got to get out the window. If I could break out the window, I can get out of this sinking vehicle. I was able to get out the window. Got out of the window, and then all I said, I just got to get to the surface of the water. I got to the surface of the water. And then I kept saying to myself, I just have to get to the edge of the ice. I just have to get there. So I broke it down in small little steps. And miraculously, a man was driving by at midnight, and he saw this thing on the side of the road, and it was me. And he risked his life crawling out on the ice to rescue me. He resuscitated me on the side of the road, and he called the ambulance, and they brought me into the hospital, and I survived. And when I thought back to that experience, and when I was reading the police reports, the very first thing on the police report that it said, the police officer said, we did not predict she could survive this car accident. She was underwater for too long. It was minus 20. It was midnight. The chances of somebody rescuing her, we can't predict. We can't predict that she would have survived. She's a bit of an anomaly. That's what they keep telling me. I'm an anomaly. And what was really, really interesting about that life event
is that I realized that I actually had this capacity to keep breaking down predictions, right? People said, you can't do this. I thought, guess what? I'm going to try. So I decided to go back to school. I went back to school. My parents supported me, and I figured it out. I had fantastic teachers who helped me get myself on track. And now I have this old story of this girl who was very, very susceptible to what people were saying about me. I was very susceptible and believed what people were saying about me to be true. And then I had that kind of TSN turning point, right? Where all of a sudden I was like, no, I want to study this. I want to know, how can we move on? How do you bounce back from stuff like this? So I started studying resiliency. I went to university for 10 years and I figured it out. It wasn't easy. The best report card I have ever gotten is still in junior kindergarten. That's the last time I got straight A's, but I worked for it. Now, when we think of the ocean of resiliency, which I get to study, it's this idea of how do we bounce back from adversity? Bad stuff happens to all of us, but how do we figure it out and how do we move forward from that? In my particular definition of resiliency, I like to look at it this way. Resiliency is the ability to make a masterpiece of the brokenness of your life. Okay, bad stuff's going to happen to us. How can we make it into something that really matters? What can we do to try and create something that's beautiful? So for me, I had this idea. We need to teach kids to dust themselves off and to figure it out. Why do we study this? We study this because each and every one of us are going to experience heartaches and disappointments, and we're going to have things not go our way. And so what was so important to me is this idea that I want to be able to teach children how they can be resilient. And this introduces this idea of a schema. So Jean Piaget introduced us this notion of schema many, many years ago. And he said schemas are the building blocks of information, and it's how we see the world. My littlest one, Hunter, at the time, I had one son, and he was sitting in his high chair. Okay, so Hunter's sitting in his high chair, and at the time we had this little white cat. And this little white cat jumped on onto the tray of his high chair. Okay? And I have to tell you, he looked at me, my son did, with his eyes just absolutely in wonderment. And I think he actually thought one of his stuffed animals came to life, right? And what do I do as a teacher? I say, this is a teachable moment. So I pick up this cat. And so here is this little 8-month-old child in a high chair, and I'm holding this cat. I said, Hunter, this is a cat. This cat has a nose, and it has eyes, and it has whiskers, and it has ears, and it has a tail. If you squeeze it, it kind of like squeaks a little bit. We call this a cat. Now, to understand a schema, what basically happens in his brain is he has this checklist of all of this criteria that now means a cat when he sees it. And our dog walked by, and Hunter looked at me, and he looked at the dog, and he looked at me, and he looked up with this little face, and he said, Mom, cat. I was like, oh dear, that's a dog. So I thought, teachable moment. So I picked up this dog and I'm like, you know what, Hunter, I understand why you thought it was a cat because it has a nose and it has ears and it has whiskers. When you squeeze this one, he kind of growls and he's bigger. So when they're bigger, we actually call those dogs. So from a psychological perspective, what is actually happening in his brain is that his brain will send a neuron and say, okay, so this is a cat. But then you know what? This is different. This is different. There's a different criteria. So now this actually becomes a dog, right? So it was quite fun with this particular analogy. We were on our way out to the lake house, which is just about 20 minutes north of where we lived, and Hunter was in his back seat in his car seat, and he started kicking the back of my chair, and he got really, really excited, and he's like, Mom, look at dogs, dogs, dogs. And I'm looking everywhere for clearly a pack of wolves that is chasing my car. I'm looking everywhere, and I don't see any dogs, and all of a sudden I look over, and you know what? There's a field of cows. And I was like, oh dear, that's a cow. So you pull over at that point, and I say, okay. And what's fascinating, again, what's happening in that brain is that he's taking pieces of things he knows to be true, and he's trying to match it to be able to get an idea of what this is. So what's quite fascinating is that's how building blocks of schema work. You have these lists of things, and they either assimilate, or we have to actually create or accommodate to make new, different places of organization. I wanted to look at those little building blocks, those little pieces that makes people different in terms of how they manage adversity. On the road of life, how come sometimes people give up, but then other people get up and they dust themselves off and they figure it out? Why do you give up when somebody else can get up? What's the difference? There's 4 things that contribute to this. The first one is the sense of belonging. We have to belong to something or to someone. This matters. The second is perspective. We have to be able to frame information in a way that makes sense to us.
The third is the notion of acceptance. We have to be able to accept our stories and learn from them. And the fourth one is hope. So the first one takes me to Honduras. I think Honduras is a beautiful country. It is such a beautiful place, and the Hondurans are beautiful people, but the reality is their country is very, very sick. Their soil is contaminated, and their socio-system is very, very fragile, and it's very damaged. And there are so many single mothers and orphans in Honduras, more so than any other areas in this particular geographical region. And what was very interesting is I was working in a village that was called Nuevo Periso, just outside of Tegucigalpa. And this was a village that was started 50 years ago. 50 years ago, they started this village. The woman's name was Sister Mary Rosa. And what was interesting about Honduras at the time is that women could not own land. Women could not be on title of land. So what she did as a sister within the convent, she opened up some of the land in Honduras, and she gave homes to single mothers. And part of the agreement of having a home in this village was that you had to take in some of the orphan children of the country. So you would have a tia, or an auntie, as they call it. She would have a little home on this area, and she would look after the children, the orphans. And some of these tias, part of the commitment is that you had to devote yourself to these children for the rest of your life. The children who are part of Sociedad de Amigos, the children who are part of this village, they are doing remarkably well when we compare them to children who are not part of that village. These children are not just surviving, these children are thriving. These children belong to something. And the message I got from my work in Honduras was that we have to belong to somebody. We have to belong. Somebody has to care about us to be able to be okay. One of the strategies I like to use to engage kids, and my strategy is I grab a soccer ball and I start juggling it. I bounce it on my foot, I bounce it on my knee to try and interact with them. And this little boy came up to me, and again, this was a very remote rural school. They hadn't had school supplies in over 3 years. Okay, there was 20 little children in this room schoolhouse on the side of the mountain, and they had not had supplies in 3 years. Okay, they had no paper, they had no pencils. It was just the teacher and these children. And this little boy asked me, he's like, would you come play soccer with me? And I'd be like, absolutely, I'll totally come play soccer with you. And then we started to walk outside from the schoolroom. And as you can see in this illustration, the ground is very, very harsh. The ground is very broken. And I looked down at this child, and this child was showing me the symptom of the greatest form of poverty. The greatest sign of poverty is when a child does not have shoes. If a child does not have shoes, it is the lowest of the low in terms of socioeconomic status. And this little boy didn't have shoes on. And I looked at his feet, and his feet were completely cut open. They had open sores, and his feet looked so incredibly painful. And I stopped the little guy, and I'm like, dude, I totally want to play soccer with you, but look at your feet. And he looked at me, and he started to laugh. He said, you're so silly. And I'm like, me? I'm silly? He's like, I have a ball. Why are you looking at what I don't have when I have a soccer ball right here? This is all you need to play soccer. And he took the ball and he ran away, and he's like, come. He's like, why don't you focus on what you have instead of focusing on what I don't have? And I was completely shocked. It was this beautiful experience where this child was showing me, think about what you have. Why are you thinking about what you don't have? Which really informed my understanding of the importance of perspective. 2 weeks later, and I'm standing on the side of the road, which is not where you actually should be, right? And I had this opportunity where the people I was working with, the Palestinians, could take me so far, and then they left me on the side of the road, and then the Israelis came to pick me up to take me to the next place where I was going. So here I was standing on the side of the road, waiting for this transaction to happen, and I was the commodity being exchanged, and I was feeling a little bit nervous. Okay, so I had the Sea of Galilee to my left, I had Lebanon ahead of me, I had Syria to my right, and there was tanks that were going by, and I was just standing in the middle of the road waiting for a ride. This is not a safe place to be waiting for a ride. As you know, there's lots of conflict. And it was interesting because I started to feel nervous, and what do you do when you're super nervous standing on the side of the road in Israel? You pull out your phone and you start looking at pictures, right? That's what you do. That's your strategy, right? It's like your little safety blanket. So I'm flipping through, and then finally, the person I was waiting for, he came up, and he just stood there beside me, and he pulled out his phone, and he started flipping through pictures too. And I thought this was so interesting, because here we are on the other side of the world. He has a phone, and I have a phone, and we're flipping through pictures.
And what was interesting, I happened to find a picture of my daughter, and she was playing soccer. And I was looking at it, I said, hey, this is my kid. This is my daughter. She's a striker. She's playing soccer. And he's like, oh, look. And he went through his phone, and he found a picture of his daughter playing soccer, and he showed it to me. And he's like, look, same. And I thought, oh, that's awesome. But then I looked closely at the picture, and right behind where his daughter was standing, there was a sign, and it was in 3 languages. It was in Hebrew, and it was in Arabic, and it was in English. And in English, what I was able to read, it said, warning, minefields. And I just had this moment as a parent, as a researcher, as everything, I just kind of put everything down. I said, how do you do it? How do you raise your children, and they're playing soccer next to minefields? How do you do it? And he's looked at me, he's like, he goes, it's very straightforward. I accept my story. I accept my life. And I parent my daughter a day at a time. I only focus on right now. I focus on today. And what was interesting, in Western practices, we worry about our kids. We worry about futures. We worry about where things are going. And what was so fascinating is he shared with me in that moment, no. Parent for today. Hope for the best for tomorrow, but parent right now, which I think was a very interesting lesson to learn. My son was playing in the Ontario Basketball Championships. Okay, he was playing in the Ontario Basketball. The team was in the last game of the tournament, and he and the opposition team were going back and forth. So now there is 3 seconds left on the clock, and the Peterborough Power team is down by 1 point. Okay, they're down by 1 point, and all of a sudden the ball is in the opposite end of the court, and there's 3 seconds, and we figure, hey, this is over, right? So our team is behind by 1. Out of nowhere, my son goes running down the court, makes Mad D, grabs the ball, runs all the way back, completely wide open, goes for a layup, and sinks the ball, right? The place erupts, and everybody was so excited for Hunter and the team, and they were cheering, and they're like, yeah, way to go, we got this. And then all of a sudden it got really, really quiet, and we looked over at the ref, and do you know what the ref said? No basket. His layup actually had 4 steps. Hunter got called for traveling. All of a sudden, the other team figure out they just won, and they erupted as they should. They were excited, and they got their banner, and they were all freaking out, and everyone was so excited. And as a parent, my heart sank. And I know you might say, oh, it's just a basketball game, but do you know what? He was feeling that with every ounce of his being, right? And he lost the game for his team, and they were eliminated. I sat there, and parents were saying, oh, it's okay, and everybody filters out of the gym, and everybody finally is gone. And I look over to try and figure out where Hunter is, and he's still standing there right under the basket. He's just standing there. And I can see there's tears in his eyes, and I can see he's really upset. And as a parent, and even as a researcher, as somebody who studies psychology, I don't even know what to say to him. I don't even know what to say to try and make this better. If I could take away the pain, I would. So I walked down through the bleachers. I walked up to him, and I'm like, dude, I don't even know what to say. And he looked at me, and he said, do you know what, Mom? I hope I get to make a buzzer beater and win a championship next year. I know what losing feels like. I want to know what it feels like to win. I hope I get that chance. My son taught me a lesson that day in hope, right? You could easily give up and walk away, or you can hope for another opportunity to be able to make that better, to be able to have that chance. And that was quite significant to me. And it brought my full story where I realized the children in Israel and the children in Honduras and our children here, we need to foster that sense of hope that the future is very, very bright and we'll have an opportunity for second chances. Now, when I finished up writing up my theory, the one thing that kind of stuck out for me was this idea of humor. And I missed this notion of humor because I realized sometimes things are really, really funny. And sometimes our being able to laugh at the idiosyncratic moments of our life is actually what's going to get you through really hard days. I was having a really hard day because they still happen. Having a really hard day. I was feeling all the edges of my life, and I was just like, wow. And I was trying to get my kids out the door in the morning, and my littlest one, Jackson, turned to me and he said, Mommy, don't forget to eat breakfast. And I said, oh, dude, Mommy does not have time for breakfast. And then I went and packed up my gym bag and my work bag, and I got everything ready, made sure the kids had their lunches, and I run through the kitchen, and then I stopped, and there's Jackson with this note for me and this piece of toast with peanut butter on it. And it says, Mom, out of every mom in the world, you are the best mom I ever had. And I was like, I'm the only mom you've ever had, but still, that's pretty significant. And then I was looking at this, and he had this beautiful sense of pride in offering this. And he's like, Mom, eat the toast. And if you look at that illustration, that is a very moldy piece of bread that Jackson prepared for me. That was the moldiest piece of bread. I don't even know where he found that piece of bread to make for me. And I had this moment where I was like, I don't know what's going to happen if I eat this moldy toast, but I'm going to eat it anyway. And I'm going to let him know that I love the fact that he's showing me compassion and he's being a good guy. So I ate moldy toast, and I was okay at the end of the day. My final thoughts for you today, everyone, is I really want to encourage you to never, ever give up. Don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on other people, okay? Because I honestly believe that love deeply, and that love will matter. That love will matter. The love will get you through. And when we think that sometimes that it doesn't make a difference, I don't believe that, because I feel that love makes a difference. I also want to assure you that science cannot predict your potential. Science can't predict what you're able to do. It told me I wasn't going to be able to finish school. Now I get to go and teach university students every single day. So don't let science tell you what you can or cannot do. And the last thing is, I want to tell you that you are stronger, you are braver, and you are more capable than you can ever imagine. If somebody said to me, you're going to be able to survive a car accident, you're going to be able to have all these experiences, I never would have thought that was possible. So please take note from me that you can accomplish anything that you put your mind to, because I absolutely believe that your potential, as my potential, is absolutely limitless. Thank you.